Elena slipped away from her quarters during the station's artificial night cycle, heart hammering against her ribs. 3 years of submission had taught her to move silently, to keep her eyes down, to become invisible to her Xenovian masters. Now, those same skills served a different purpose as she navigated the service corridors toward the mid-station maintenance shaft. The message could be a trap. The Xenovians were known to test human loyalty through elaborate setups, offering hope only to publicly crush those who reached for it. She'd witnessed 6 public executions her first month aboard, all humans caught attempting to communicate with Earth or organize among themselves. But if it wasn't a trap, the maintenance shaft was a narrow tube running vertically through the station's central core, rarely used except during major repairs. Elena paused at the entrance, listening to the hum of the environmental systems. Nothing seemed out of place. Taking a deep breath, she keyed in her maintenance access code and slipped inside. "Identify yourself," came a whisper from above. Elena froze. "Cleaning staff, Delta section," she replied with her cover identity. "Bullshit," the voice said, softer now. "Your commander, Elena Reyes, Earth Defense Force. Battle of the Lunar Gateway. 37 confirmed Xenovian kills before they overwhelmed your position." A figure dropped silently from an access panel overhead. A small woman with dark hair streaked with gray, wearing the same drab maintenance uniform as Elena. "Chief Engineer Maria Santos," the woman said, extending her hand. "Though they call me Waste Management Technician, 12B now." Elena hesitated. "How do I know?" "You don't." Maria cut her off. "But I watched you yesterday. That Xenovian diplomat spilled his drink on you deliberately. 2nd-degree chemical burn. I guess. Yet you didn't flinch, didn't show pain. 3 years serving the bastards who destroyed everything we built, and you still haven't broken. That's why we need you." "We?" Elena asked. Maria nodded toward a seemingly solid wall. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a cramped compartment housing 3 more humans hunched over salvaged equipment. "Welcome to Resistance Cell Omega-17, Maria said. "We have 90 seconds before the security sweep passes this sector again. After that, there's a 7-minute window to show you what we've built." Inside the hidden room, screens displayed camera feeds from across the station, data streams, and what appeared to be a communications relay cobbled together from scavenged parts. "We've established contact with 27 other facilities," explained a gaunt man with burn scars covering half his face. "Waste processing stations, mining outposts, research facilities. Anywhere they use human labor." "That's impossible," Elena whispered. "The Xenovians monitor all communications, the dampening fields." "We found a way around them," Maria said, pride evident in her voice. "The Xenovians are arrogant. They believe we're too primitive to understand their technology, so they don't bother securing outdated systems. We've repurposed their waste disposal network as a communication backbone. Garbage collectors across the system, united," added a younger man with a bitter smile. "Fitting, since that's how they see us." Elena's mind raced. Even if you can communicate, what's the point? We tried fighting them. Earth's military, our best technology. It wasn't enough. Maria's eyes hardened. "We're not planning a frontal assault. We're collecting intelligence, identifying weaknesses, and waiting for the right moment." She handed Elena a data chip no larger than a fingernail. 3 days ago, one of our people on Mars transmitted this before going dark. We need someone with tactical experience to make sense of it." "Why me? Why now?" "Because something's happening," the scared man said gravely. "The Xenovians are accelerating their processing of human populations, and we've intercepted transmissions suggesting they're concerned about some kind of anomaly among Earth subjects." A soft alert chimed from one of the monitors. "Security sweep approaching," Maria warned. "Take the chip. Review it in private. If you're with us, flush your toilet 3 times at exactly 200 tomorrow night." As Elena slipped back into the corridor, the hidden door sealing behind her, She felt the weight of the tiny chip in her palm. For the first time since Earth fell, she allowed herself to feel something dangerous, something the Xenovians had tried to genetically engineer out of their human servants. Hope. In the dim light of his cramped quarters, Marcus examined the neural implant Clavex had secretly given him before his release. The device, no larger than a grain of rice, pulsed with a faint bioluminescence that matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. "This will allow us to communicate securely," she had whispered while pretending to administer a routine neural scan. "But if they detect it, we're both dead." Marcus weighed the risks. Clavex was half-Meridian, a species genetically modified by the Xenovians into perfect servants, supposedly incapable of deception or rebellion. Yet here she was, committing treason against her masters. Either she was sincere, or this was the most elaborate trap the Xenovians had ever devised. Exhaling slowly, he pressed the device against his temple. It adhered instantly, burrowing painlessly beneath his skin. A second later, his vision swam with iridescent patterns as the implant synchronized with his nervous system. "Can you hear me?" The thought voice was unmistakably Clavex. Precise, clinical, yet tinged with an emotion Marcus couldn't quite identify. "Fear, hope, I hear you," he responded, marveling at how naturally the neural interface functioned. "Why are you helping me?" Images flooded his mind in response. Not words, but memories. Clavex as a child, watching her Meridian mother subjected to experimental procedures. The gradual realization that her people had once been brilliant philosophers before Xenovian uplift reduced them to servile functionaries. Her decades of secret research into the true history of the cosmic hierarchy. "The Xenovians are lying to everyone," her thoughts continued. "They didn't create the hierarchy. They merely exploit it. Every species they encounter is evaluated not for its actual potential, but for the threat it poses to Xenovian dominance." Marcus processed this revelation. "And humans, what makes us so threatening?" In response, Clavex shared data from her scans of Marcus's neural activity during the containment breach. The visualization showed something remarkable. His neural pathways had spontaneously reconfigured to mirror the architecture of the Xenovian emergency systems, not just interfacing with the technology, but temporarily becoming compatible with it at a fundamental level. "This adaptive neural plasticity is unprecedented," Clavex explained. "The Xenovian High Command is terrified of it. They classified it as a Level 1 evolutionary threat, the same designation given to only 2 other species in their 12,000-year history." "What happened to those species?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. "Extinction," came the grim reply. "The official records claim they self-destructed through warfare, but my research suggests the Xenovians engineered their collapse. And now, they're preparing something similar for humanity." A sudden alarm blared through the waste processing station. Marcus jolted upright on his bunk as the neural connection with Clavex went silent. The overhead speakers crackled to life. "Attention all personnel. Enhanced security protocols now in effect. Report any unusual human behavior immediately. Mandatory neural compliance scans will commence in 30 minutes." Through the thin walls of his quarters, Marcus heard shouting, heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of Xenovian enforcers moving through the station. Something had triggered a security response. But what? The implant pulsed once more against his temple. A final message from Clavex flashed through his consciousness. "They've discovered the Mars incident. A human girl escaped with classified data. Find her before they do." Marcus felt cold sweat beading on his forehead. The Mars incident. What human girl? And then another thought struck him, one that made his blood run cold. If the Xenovians were conducting neural compliance scans, they would inevitably discover Clavex's implant. He had 30 minutes to escape, or his one ally among the Xenovians would face execution. The revolution had just begun, and it was already demanding its first impossible choice. Zara's stolen shuttle drifted through the asteroid belt, its systems failing one by one as emergency power reserves dwindled. Huddled in the pilot's chair, her body racked with radiation sickness from a hasty escape through Mars' compromised atmospheric shield, she struggled to stay conscious. The shuttle's environmental systems had already shut down, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. "Hold on," she whispered to herself, her breath forming crystalline clouds in the frigid air. "Just a little longer." The navigation console flickered, showing her trajectory toward the coordinates her father had made her memorize years ago. An emergency rendezvous point he called humanity's last hope. Whether anyone still monitored it after 3 years of Xenovian occupation seemed increasingly doubtful. As her vision blurred, Zora's thoughts turned to the horrific scenes she'd witnessed in the research facility. The methodical way the Xenovian scientists had processed her community, her parents, her friends, like cattle in a slaughterhouse. Their clinical discussions about genetic harvesting and adaptation potentials as they extracted bone marrow from screaming victims. A violent coughing fit seized her, speckling the console with droplets of blood. The radiation poisoning was accelerating. Without medical intervention, she had hours at most. With trembling fingers, Zora accessed the facility database she'd accidentally downloaded. If she was going to die, at least she could understand why this had happened. The information might help whoever found her body, if anyone did. The files were encrypted, but her father had taught her basic Xenovian cipher structures. She managed to decrypt a fragment labeled Human Adaptation Anomaly Report, and what she read made her forget the cold, the pain, the radiation burning through her cells. Subjects expressing unprecedented genetic adaptation rates when exposed to controlled environmental stressors. Mars colony showing 32% higher neural plasticity than Earth-based control groups. Hypothesis: reduced gravity and increased radiation exposure accelerating evolutionary adaptations. Recommend immediate harvesting of all viable genetic material before further mutation occurs. They had massacred her entire colony because they were changing, adapting too quickly, becoming something the Xenovians feared. A proximity alert jolted her from her grim reading. Something was approaching. A small vessel using an unfamiliar propulsion system that barely registered on the shuttle's sensors. Xenovian stealth technology. Had they tracked her escape after all? Zara tried to power up the engines for one last desperate attempt at evasion, but nothing responded. She was dead in space, with no options left. The mysterious vessel drew alongside the shuttle, magnetic clamps securing a docking seal over the airlock. Zara grabbed a maintenance tool, a pathetic weapon, but better than nothing. If the Xenovians wanted her alive, she'd make them work for it. The airlock cycled open. Instead of the anticipated Xenovian enforcers, a human woman in a makeshift environmental suit stepped through, her expression shifting from determination to shock as she surveyed the shuttle's condition. "My God," the woman breathed. "You're just a child." Behind her, a man with a neural scanner swept the cabin. "Elena, she's suffering from acute radiation poisoning. We need to get her to medical immediately." "Who?" Zara managed, her voice barely audible. The woman, Elena, moved quickly to her side, already administering emergency anti-radiation compounds from a medical kit. "We're with the resistance. Your distress signal aligned with frequencies we monitor." "I didn't. Send a distress signal," Zara whispered. Elena and the man exchanged worried glances. "Then how did the transmission leading us here originate from your shuttle?" Elena asked. Zara's gaze drifted to the console where the partially decrypted files still displayed. A chill that had nothing to do with the failing environmental systems ran through her. "They wanted you to find me," she realized, horror dawning through her radiation-hazed mind. "I'm not an escape. I'm bait." The hollowed asteroid's interior sparkled with crystalline structures that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Kilax's movements. The Artaxian led Elena, Marcus, and a still-recovering Zara deeper into the hidden outpost, through corridors that branched in mathematically perfect patterns. "Your species values unpredictability," Calax observed, its voice a harmonic combination of tones that somehow formed English words. We Artaxians calculate all variables before acting. This is why the Xenovians fear you, but merely contain us. The central chamber opened before them, a massive geodesic space where representatives from 7 species had gathered around a holographic display of the solar system. Elena recognized none of them. One resembled an oscillating cloud of luminescent particles. Another appeared to be a collection of crystalline rods floating in a nutrient bath. A third looked almost human, except for the branching neural filaments visible beneath translucent skin. The Concordance, Calax announced. 7 species deemed non-threatening by Xenovian standards. 7 species waiting generations for a catalyst. The particle cloud being shifted, its voice emerging as modulated light patterns translated by Calax's technology. We are the Muveri. For 8,000 cycles, we have calculated resistance scenarios. Until humans appeared, the probability of success against Xenovian dominance never exceeded 0.73%. And now? Marcus asked. 23.4%, replied the being. Still improbable, but within the realm of possibility. That's not exactly encouraging, Elena said. The nearly human figure stepped forward. I am Trell, last unmodified Meridian. Before Xenovian uplift, my people were philosophers and theoretical physicists. Now we are bureaucrats and service providers, genetically altered for compliance. Its eyes fixed on Marcus. Your neural connection with scientific director Clavex suggests my people's original nature is not entirely eradicated. Zara, still weak but insistent on attending, studied the holographic display. These are Xenovian fleet movements, she said, recognizing patterns from the data she'd stolen. They're consolidating forces around Earth. Calax manipulated the hologram, zooming in on a massive vessel unlike any other in the Xenovian fleet. The Harvest Carrier. It contains technology designed to systematically strip all resources from a planet, including biological specimens. It has not been deployed in over 3,000 cycles. They're going to harvest Earth, Elena asked, horror rising in her throat. No, corrected the crystalline entity, its voice resonating through the fluid medium. Harvest carriers do not harvest resources. They harvest species. When the Xenovians designate a species as an evolutionary threat, they preserve a small breeding population as specimens and eliminate the rest. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. They're planning to preserve a few thousand humans in zoos while wiping out everyone else on Earth. Calax's geometric form shifted in what might have been a nod. The order has already been given. The harvest carrier will reach Earth in 7 standard days. Elena's mind raced with impossible calculations. Earth had no defense capabilities left after the initial Xenovian invasion. The resistance was scattered, poorly equipped, and vastly outnumbered. Even with these unexpected allies, what could they possibly do against a civilization thousands of years more advanced? There is one possibility, said the Muveri, its particles forming a complex pattern that somehow conveyed grim determination. A theoretical weapon designed by the Artaxians, but never implemented due to our species' aversion to risk. Calax projected a new hologram, a complex mechanism that seemed to violate several laws of physics as Elena understood them. The neural cascade, Calax explained, designed to exploit a fundamental weakness in all Xenovian technology. Their systems are keyed to recognize authorized neural patterns. If enough humans with your unique neural plasticity synchronize and interface with their network simultaneously, we could shut down their entire command structure, Marcus finished, immediately grasping the concept. But that would require dozens of trained neural interfaces, and a direct connection to the Xenovian central network, added Trell, which exists in only one location accessible to us. The hologram shifted to display a heavily fortified station orbiting Jupiter. The same station where I've been serving drinks to Xenovian diplomats for 3 years, Elena said, a dangerous smile spreading across her face. I think it's time I got a promotion. Inside the Titan facility's high-security section, Elena and her team moved silently through sterile corridors lined with observation chambers. Each contained humans in various stages of modification, some with enlarged muscular systems but atrophied frontal lobes, others with enhanced sensory organs but no vocal cords. The sight made her stomach churn. 17 minutes until the neural sync window closes, whispered Rivera. The communications specialist who had helped orchestrate the simultaneous system crashes across Xenovian networks. Elena nodded, forcing herself to focus on the mission rather than the horror surrounding them. Marcus, Howard, Zara, and the interface team holding up. Through the neural relay implanted by Calax, Marcus's thoughts reached her with crystalline clarity. 17 of the 50 are still synchronized. Zara's directing the worm through the final firewall now. She's God, Elena. She's amazing. The Artaxians say they've never seen anyone navigate alien code structures this intuitively. A door at the end of the corridor bore Xenovian markings that translated roughly to prime specimens. Elena signaled her team to prepare breaching charges while she accessed the security panel with the bypass codes provided by Clavex, who had likely been executed by now for her betrayal. The massive doors slid open, revealing not another laboratory, but what appeared to be a nursery. Dozens of infants and young children lay in advanced incubation units, monitored by automated systems. "What the hell?" muttered one of her team members. "They're keeping human kids like lab rats." The nearest monitoring station provided the sickening answer as Elena accessed its data. "These aren't ordinary children," she said, her voice hollow. "They're genetic hybrids, human DNA spliced with Xenovian sequences. They're trying to create servitor beings with human neural plasticity, but Xenovian loyalty imprinting." "Elena," Marcus's voice cut through her shock. "The facility director just transmitted an emergency signal. He's activated some kind of failsafe." Alarms blared throughout the complex. The laboratory's lights shifted from sterile white to pulsing red. Over the facility's communication system, a calm Xenovian voice announced, "Purge protocol initiated. Containment breach detected. All specimens will be terminated to prevent contamination. Personnel should proceed to evacuation pods." The incubation units began releasing a colorless gas. "They're killing the children," Elena shouted, rushing to the nearest unit and smashing its control panel with her weapon. "Override the system." Her team scrambled to disable the purge protocol, but there were too many units, too little time. Through the observation windows, Elena could see similar purges happening in other laboratories. The Xenovians choosing to destroy their experiments rather than risk them falling into enemy hands. A processed human guard, one of the loyalty-modified security forces, appeared at the doorway, weapon raised. Elena spun to face him, knowing she wouldn't be fast enough. The guard fired, not at Elena, but at the central purge control system, destroying it instantly. The gas release halted. Elena stared in shock as the guard lowered his weapon. His eyes, despite the surgical scars and neural implants visible beneath his shaved scalp, showed a clarity that shouldn't have been possible. "Even when they rewrite our brains," he said hoarsely, "they can't erase what makes us human." More process guards appeared behind him, all with the same impossible lucidity in their eyes. One of them spoke, her voice mechanical but her words unmistakably human. "The loyalty programming. When the systems crashed, something broke in our heads. We can think again." Marcus's thoughts echoed urgently in Elena's mind. The neural worm didn't just crash their systems. It affected the neural implants in the processed humans. Zara didn't just give us control of their technology. She's freeing their minds. Beyond the walls of the facility, the first Lorian ships were engaging with the approaching Xenovian fleet, the opening salvos of what would become known as the liberation of Titan. But the true victory had already been won in the minds of beings the Xenovians had considered nothing more than reprogrammed tools. The spark of rebellion had become a wildfire. Aboard the Xenovian command vessel Inexorable Doctrine, Supreme Commander Zorthal witnessed the unthinkable unfold across his tactical displays. They coordinated multi-species attacks, successfully keeping his forces from Earth. The Sundering Weapon, a device capable of destabilizing a star's core, still 6 hours from optimal deployment range. And worst of all, the unprecedented communications breach that was spreading through Xenovian space like a virus. Shut down all non-essential communications. He roared at his officers. Isolate the command network. But it was too late. The human female, this Zara Okafor, whose name now featured prominently on his priority target list, had done something no being had accomplished in 12,000 years of Xenovian dominance. She hadn't merely hacked their systems. She had transformed the Xenovian communication network itself into a delivery mechanism for the truth. On thousands of worlds across Xenovian space, beings of all species were receiving undoctored footage from genetic modification chambers, from processing centers, from the historical correction facilities where inconvenient truths were systematically erased from collective memory. The carefully maintained illusion of benevolent guidance was shattering in real time. Commander, his second-in-command reported, mandibles clicking with agitation, we're receiving reports of civil unrest on 16 core worlds. 3 Tier 3 labor planets have declared independence. The Muveri Collective has withdrawn computational support from our strategic systems. Zorthal's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. Deploy the loyalty enforcers. Any being questioning the natural order is to be terminated immediately. Sir, the communications officer interrupted, her voice wavering. I'm receiving. It's a direct transmission from Earth, targeted specifically to you. Block it, Zorthal commanded. I can't, sir. It's using your personal genetic verification codes. The system recognizes it as coming from you. Impossible. His codes were unbreakable, keyed to his specific neural pattern and genetic sequence. Only another Xenovian of his direct lineage cold. A cold realization washed over him. Put it through. Private channel. The holographic display before him shimmered, forming the image of a young Xenovian officer, one whose genetic structure matched his own closely enough to bypass security protocols. Hello, Father, said Science Officer Kelnar. Or should I address you by your full title? Supreme Commander Zorthal, Architect of 1,000 extinctions. You betray your species, your lineage, and the natural order, Zorthal hissed. For what? These humans? These adaptive aberrations? Kelnar's expression remained impassive. I study human neural architecture for 3 cycles. They don't just adapt, Father, they empathize. They can hold contradictory ideas simultaneously. They imagine possibilities that don't exist and then bring them into being. Their cognitive pattern is not a threat to the galaxy. It might be its salvation. Philosophical drivel, Zorthal sneered. You've always been weak-minded, too interested in understanding lesser species rather than maintaining proper distance. That distance is a lie, Kelnar replied. I've accessed the ancestral archives you thought were destroyed. The Xenovians weren't always the administrators of the hierarchy. We were once classified as a Tier 5 species ourselves, before we overthrew our overseers and rewrote history. Zorthal's hands clenched into fists. Those records were expunged. Nothing is ever truly deleted, Father. I know about the progenitors. I know about the true purpose of the hierarchy. And now, thanks to the human broadcast, every sentient being in our sphere of influence knows as well. Around Zorthal, his bridge crew had grown disturbingly silent, many openly watching the exchange with expressions that hinted at dawning doubts. You've doomed us all, Zorthal said quietly. The hierarchy exists for a reason. The progenitors established it as protection. Protection through oppression is no protection at all. Kelnar interrupted. The Sundering Weapon has been disabled. I transmitted the shutdown codes myself. Zorthal stared at his offspring in disbelief. Then, with deliberate calm, he activated his final contingency, the quantum communicator that would summon the progenitors themselves. "If logic and order cannot prevail," he said, "then let the architects of the galaxy decide." As the ancient device powered up, Kelnar's expression shifted from defiance to alarm. "Father, no. You don't understand what you're doing." But Zorthol had already initiated the signal, a psychic pulse that rippled outward, beyond the confines of normal spacetime. The message was simple: the containment has failed. The infection spreads. Throughout the solar system, every sentient being felt the response as a shared psychic impression. Interest, observation, assessment. What no one, not even Zorthol, recognized was the underlying emotion in that vast consciousness. Not anger at disruption, but satisfaction that the long experiment was finally bearing fruit. Elena stood at the observation viewport of the crystalline chamber, watching as representatives from dozens of species filed into the Council of Equals. The massive observer vessel had materialized in Earth orbit 6 hours ago, its impossible architecture defying human physics. Now it served as neutral ground for the first truly democratic gathering in galactic history. "Nervous?" Marcus asked, joining her at the viewport. The neural interface visible at his temple pulsed with a subtle blue light, a permanent modification that allowed him to translate the thoughts of multiple species simultaneously. "Terrified," Elena admitted. 12 hours ago, I was planning a desperate last stand against the Xenovian fleet. Now we're in peace talks with beings who've apparently been manipulating galactic evolution for millions of years." Through the viewport, Earth hung serene against the blackness of space, seemingly unchanged despite the momentous events unfolding around it. Most humans on the planet below remained unaware that representatives of their species were now negotiating the future of all sentient life in the galaxy. "The observer requested your presence specifically," Marcus reminded her. "Not Zara, not me, not any other species leaders. You." Before Elena could respond, the chamber's lighting shifted, indicating the council was about to begin. As they turned to take their places, they found Supreme Commander Zorthol standing directly in their path, his Xenovian guards conspicuously absent. "Commander Reyes," he said, using her military title rather than her servant designation for the first time. "Before this performance begins, there is something you should understand." Elena tensed, but Marcus placed a restraining hand on her arm. "We're listening," he said. Zorthol's inner eyelids flicked rapidly. The hierarchy was not created for domination. It was created for protection. What the observer has not told you, what no species below Tier 1 has ever been permitted to know, is that there are predators in the dark between galaxies, entities that consume entire civilizations. The progenitors established the hierarchy as a shield, with the Xenovians as its administrators. "A shield that oppresses billions," Elena replied. "That modifies species against their will, that treats sentient beings as laboratory specimens." "Yes," Zorthol acknowledged, surprising them both. "Methods I have employed without question for centuries. But the results are undeniable. 12,000 years without a single devourer incursion in our galaxy, while 3 neighboring galaxies have fallen." He leaned closer. "Ask the observer about the devourers, Commander Reyes. Ask why the progenitors chose this moment to reveal themselves. Ask what comes next." Before Elena could respond, the crystalline tones that announced the observer reverberated through the chamber. The being of swirling light and complex geometries materialized at the center of the council chamber, its presence commanding immediate silence. "The experiment approaches its conclusion," the observer announced telepathically to all present. "For eons, we have tested species across the galaxy, using the Xenovians as unwitting instruments. True advancement comes not from domination, but from the moment when the dominated recognize their chains and shatter them together." Elena stepped forward, aware that every eye, sensory appendage, and perceptual organ in the chamber was fixed upon her. "You engineered this rebellion. The suffering of billions was part of your test." "Yes," the observer acknowledged dispassionately. The cost was calculated and deemed necessary. Necessary for what? Elena demanded, Zorthol's warning echoing in her mind. In response, the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing not the void of space, but something far more terrifying. Massive shadow entities moving between stars, consuming civilizations. The Devourer's approach, the observer stated with clinical detachment. They have consumed 12 galaxies before ours. What you perceive as cruelty was evolutionary pressure, forcing adaptability and cooperation that would never have emerged in peacetime. Elena felt the blood drain from her face as understanding dawned. This was never about freedom from the hierarchy. You needed us to break it because something worse is coming, and the old system couldn't stop it. The observer's form pulsed in what might have been confirmation. The real test begins now. You have 10 standard years to prepare. The Council of Equals fell silent as the implications sank in. Their hard-won victory against oppression had only been the prelude to a far greater challenge, survival against a threat that consumed entire galaxies. Elena's eyes met Zorthol's across the chamber. In that moment, former slave and former master shared a single, chilling understanding. The hierarchy had shattered, but the shadow looming over them all was darker than either had imagined. As the Concordance approached the swirling darkness at the galaxy's edge, Elena stood alone on the command deck. The massive view screen showed what conventional sensors couldn't properly interpret. The Devourers, entities of such alien nature that human minds struggled to comprehend them. Not solid matter, not energy, but something that existed partially outside normal spacetime, feeding on the coherent patterns of civilized life. Final synchronization check complete, reported Zorthol from the tactical station. The former Xenovian Supreme Commander now served as her executive officer, a partnership that would have been unthinkable before the cosmic hierarchy shattered. All species representatives report neural sync at optimal levels. Elena nodded. And the quantum resonance array? Dr. Chen reports ready. The Artaxian calculations predict 62.7% effectiveness. Better odds than we had against you, Elena said with a grim smile. Zorthol's inner eyelids flickered in what Elena had learned was his species' equivalent of a wry chuckle. Indeed, though I maintain that my methods, while brutal, were ultimately preparing your species for this moment, still doesn't excuse the genetic experimentation. No, he acknowledged. Some crimes have no justification, even in service to a greater purpose. This is something I have learned from humans, your capacity to hold seemingly contradictory truths simultaneously, to understand context without absolving responsibility. A soft chime indicated Marcus was contacting them from the ship's core, where thousands of representatives from dozens of species maintained a synchronized neural link that powered the Concordance's primary weapon. Technology that responded not to individual minds, but to the unified intentions of multiple species thinking in concert. The neural network is stable, Marcus reported. Zera's modifications to the synchronization protocols are holding better than expected. We're seeing unprecedented coherence between cognitive patterns that should be completely incompatible. Elena checked the chronometer. 2 minutes until the Devourers would detect their approach. The battle plan was elegant in its simplicity, developed by the combined strategic minds of 37 species. They wouldn't try to destroy the Devourers through conventional means. Instead, the Concordance's quantum resonance array would disrupt the entity's consciousness patterns, potentially transforming rather than destroying them. All stations, prepare for engagement, Elena ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of trillions of lives depending on their success. Helm, take us in. As the massive ship accelerated toward the darkness, Elena thought about the journey that had brought her here. From captive servant to resistance leader to commander of the most diverse fighting force in galactic history, the hierarchy had fallen not because any single species was superior, but because they had discovered something the progenitors had known all along. True strength came from diversity unified by common purpose. The first Devourer entity detected them, its vast consciousness turning toward the Concordance with predatory interest. Throughout the ship, alarm systems blared as reality itself seemed to warp around them. Neural synchronization holding, Marcus reported, his voice strained. Quantum resonance array charging, 60%, 70%. Zara's voice cut in from engineering. The Devourers are attempting to disrupt our consciousness patterns, compensating with adaptive neural shields. The view screen flared with impossible colors as the first Devourer entity enveloped the forward section of the ship. Crew members throughout the vessel cried out as alien thoughts brushed against their minds. Ancient hunger, cold curiosity, the patient malevolence of beings that had consumed civilizations for eons. Array at full charge. Marcus shouted over the cacophony of alarms, initiating quantum detonation. Elena gripped her command chair as energy surged through the vessel. Fire. The Concordance released not a conventional weapon, but a pulse of synchronized consciousness, the combined thought patterns of every sapient species in the galaxy, focused into a single harmonic note that rippled through space-time itself. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Devourer entity surrounding them began to change, its chaotic patterns shifting toward something more ordered, more cognizant. Similar transformations spread to nearby entities, a cascade of awareness rippling through the collective. "We are like you once," came an alien thought, directly into the minds of everyone aboard. Before isolation and fear drove us to consume rather than connect. As the transformation spread among the Devourers, Elena exchanged glances with Zorthal. Neither spoke, but both understood. The cosmic hierarchy had shattered not just to free the oppressed, but to forge something entirely new from its fragments. A civilization defined not by dominance, but by the strength found in difference united by common purpose. The first chapter in the galaxy's new story was ending. The next was about to begin.